Welcome back to Kamikaze Overdrive MMA predictions for Strikeforce and M-1 Global's Fedor versus Silva. The event will take place on Saturday, February 12th in East Rutherford, New Jersey. This show will kick off the Strikeforce Heavyweight Grand Prix, which I'll talk about in a few minutes, and I'll be giving my predictions for the 2 tournament bouts along with the 3 reserve bouts on this card. Recapping my last set of picks for UFC 126, I did quite well, going 7-0, which means there were some monetary gains for myself and those who chose to follow my picks and bet on the fights. And 4 of the 7 fights finished how I predicted them, which is always nice. If you'd like to bet on the fights like I do, check out the video description below for a link that will get you a deposit bonus of up to $125 with sportsinteraction.com. And finally, please check out my Strikeforce rankings. Following the last Strikeforce event, Robbie Lawler and Evangelista Santos have moved down, and Roger Gracie certainly took another step towards cracking the 205-pound rankings. Now, I'd like to take a few minutes to talk about the Grand Prix and how it breaks down. First off, I'm hoping this tournament will play itself out without the need for replacements and produce a winner from one of the 8 fighters that they start with. There's a lot at stake for all 8 involved. For Overeem, a chance to solidify himself on the top of the heavyweight mountain. For fighters like Verdum and Silva, an opportunity to stake their claim beyond just contender status. For dark horses like Barnett and Haritonov, exposure to current MMA mainstream. For Arlovsky and Rogers, the potential to rebound from some tough defeats and climb back to previous glory. And finally, an opportunity for Fedor Emelianenko to reaffirm himself as the greatest fighter of all time. Now, Sports Interaction has posted odds for this tournament based on who they think will emerge victorious. First off, we have Brett Rogers as the biggest underdog, paying out at 23-1. Next up, Antonio Silva, who we talked about today, pays 21-1. Andrei Arlovsky and Sergey Kharitonov both paying 17-1. They'll meet in the first round. Josh Barnett and Fabricio Verdum paying 7.5-1. Fedor Emelianenko paying out at $2.87 on the tournament favorite Alistair Overeem at $2.25. Now, from a betting standpoint, Silva at 21-1 looks tempting, and with Arlovsky and Kharitonov at 17-1 facing each other in the first round, you're almost guaranteed one of them making the semifinals, of course, barring injury. Now, I think that Rogers has a very hard road ahead of him, especially facing Josh Barnett in the first round, but really in a tournament, anything can happen. So the best advice I could give you if you have intentions of betting on this event will be to take $100, throw $20 down on each of Barnett, Verdum, Arlovsky, Kharitonov, and Silva. At the very worst, you'll have one fighter in the second round with the aforementioned head-to-head matchup between Kharitonov and Arlovsky. You could potentially wind up with 2 fighters meeting in the semifinals with the winner of that matchup, and if Barnett wins, then you're guaranteed one fighter in the finals. And at best, 4 of your 5 fighters could advance to the semis, which means that you're going to take something home regardless. You're winning some money, it's just how much. Now, even if the lowest payout fighter that pays out wins, you're still going to walk away with $50 profit on your initial $100 bet. If one of the other fighters wins the tournament, you'll pick up either $240 worth of profit or $320 worth of profit if Silva picks up the victory. Or you could end up with nothing, and that's why they call it gambling. We also have 3 reserve bouts in the event of a fighter not being able to continue that we're going to see on this card. Now, what I would have liked to see from Strikeforce is an interesting concept. Please comment if you don't agree, or if you do agree, give me your opinion. But I would like to see them run a parallel heavyweight prospects Grand Prix. Add 1 more bout, set up a second bracket. If there's an injury in the main tournament, you can still move a fighter over and use a bye in the prospects tournament, because we have 3 bouts, 1 more gives you the needed 4. And what this would do is to give an opportunity for Strikeforce to build its heavyweight division ranks and potentially create and expose a new top contender to its fans. Winning the prospects tournament, or whatever they'd like to call it, could result in potentially getting a title shot, or at the least getting a #1 contender shot with a far more established fighter, maybe one of the 8 from the tournament. But that being said, it is hard enough to run 1 MMA tournament, let alone 2 simultaneously. And on that note, it's time to get to the predictions. We kick off the night with a Grand Prix reserve bout between 2-0 Ray Sugarfoot Cepho and Valentin Python Overeem 28-5. Overeem enters this contest riding a 2-fight winning streak in which he has stopped each of his opponents inside the first minute of the opening round. On the other side of the cage, the K1 veteran is returning to MMA for the first time since 2009, where he defeated, and I use the term defeated very loosely, Kevin Jordan when Jordan injured his knee and couldn't continue. There are no odds posted for this bout, and I don't expect there will be, but I'll take a stab at them. I would think that Overeem will be the favorite, paying out around $1.35 and Seppo around $3.10. Now, simply put, Overeem will have a tremendous MMA experience advantage with 53 fights of Seppo's too. But on the other hand, Seppo has competed in 78 kickboxing matchups, so he's not a newcomer to the world of combat sports. Seppo is no doubt a talented striker. He won his first MMA fight when he connected with a head kick, and he has 38 knockouts in his kickboxing career. He has very stiff low kicks that he showed in his Strikeforce debut against Kevin Jordan. They were quite heavy, and if his opponent leaves them unchecked, they will do a great deal of damage. Seppo has good timing and likes to use a jab to keep his opponents off balance, and against Jordan he kept switching up stances, which can also give his opponents problems. Overeem trains with his brother in the Golden Glory camp, so he is no slouch on the feet either, and he has scored 11 career knockouts. He's a Muay Thai striker that can attack with both his hands and his legs. He also has heavy leg strikes and will attack the legs, body, and head, and has stopped fighters in the past with kicks. His punches are solid, he has knockout power, and is a very aggressive striker. Now, both fighters have suffered knockouts in the past. Overeem has been stopped 9 times, and Seppo has been put away on several occasions in his kickboxing career. Now, taking the fight to the mat, Overeem will have a definitive advantage over Seppo. This is where the kickboxer's MMA inexperience will show up huge. In his first Strikeforce bout, Seppo found himself on the ground with Jordan. He started off on the top in the guard and really looked out of place. When he got reversed, Seppo was thoroughly controlled on the mat, beat up, and could have lost the fight if the round had not ended. On the other side of things, Overeem has 16 career submission victories, has used a wide variety of holds, so he's quite versed on the mat, and to top things off, he has tapped out notable fighters like Randy Couture and Babalu Sobral. Now, Valentin has been tapped 15 times, but against a novice on the mat, I don't think this will be an issue. Valentin has strong takedowns, which should help him to get this fight to the mat if he wants to take it there. But Seppo has spent some time in Extreme Couture because of his grappling inexperience and strong striking skills. I would guess he was focusing his efforts on keeping his fight standing. Seppo is very capable of scoring a knockout, winning this fight on the feet, but so is Overeem. On the mat, Ray getting either submitted or pounded out is a real possibility. Plus, the threat of being taken down by Overeem could make Seppo hesitate in the striking game, while at the same time, Overeem won't be concerned about Seppo taking him down, so he'll be able to attack without holding back. I think that Overeem will recognize the opportunity for victory, is on the mat in this one, and will take it there. So my prediction is Valentin Overeem to defeat Ray Seppo by submission. Our next reserve bout will feature 9-1 Chad Gravedigger Griggs versus Gian Valente. Griggs has won 4 in a row, including his upset win over Bobby Lashley in Strikeforce debut, while Valente rebounded with a win in his last fight following an arm injury that cost him his only career defeat. Again, there are no odds posted for this contest. I would think they'd be fairly even, but with Griggs' win over Lashley, he'll probably be seen by most fans as the favorite, and the odds will reflect this. So I'll put him at $1.65 and Valente at $2.15. Neither of these fighters have a huge library of fight footage, and on top of that, the stuff I have seen is a lot of the same action. So let's take a look at some of the intangibles in this matchup. Physically, these fighters are on the smaller side of the heavyweight division, both standing 6 foot 2 inches tall, Griggs weighing in at 230 pounds and Valente at 225. Griggs works as a firefighter and as a result hasn't been able to commit himself fully to MMA. This will be his first fight of 2011. He fought once in 2010, once in 2009, missed all 2008, and 2007 was his busiest year of his career with 4 fights. On the other side, Valente has been much more active with 5 fights in 2009 and 3 in 2010. Of the 2 fighters, Griggs has fought in larger promotions, having already fought in Strikeforce once, and a 2-fight stint in the IFL, so he'll have an edge there. Valente is the far superior athlete. He was a successful wrestler and football player at the collegiate level and had a cup of tea at the NFL level. Of all these different comparables, I think the last one could have the greatest impact on this fight. Now, these 2 fighters have combined for 12 career first-round stoppages in 18 overall fights. Both have heavy hands, rely heavily on ground and pound. Against Lashley, Griggs survived on his back, took a beating, and then when Lashley began to tire, he did some serious damage with limited strikes. From what other footage I've seen of Griggs, he prefers to take his opponent to the mat and work for a referee stoppage. His technique is far from picture perfect. He scrambles to stay on top, all the while throwing shots when he gets the opportunity to. Valente's game isn't a whole lot different. He likes to close the distance, tie up his opponent, and will do a little dirty boxing and take the fight to the mat for some ground and pound of his own. He seems to have a little bit better control of his opponents on the mat than Griggs does, controlling them before unloading with a barrage of pistons like strikes before the ref steps in. Further, having watched his last handful of fights in sequence, Valente has added some leg kicks to his game, and he has improving stand-up. He keeps his chin tucked nice and keeps his hands up. This is a hard fight to call, not knowing a lot about either fighter, but I think that because of Villante's athleticism, he is able to bring more to the cage than Griggs and just simply execute better, so I'll be taking Gian Villante to defeat Chad Griggs by stoppage. The third reserve bout features a matchup of undefeated 10-0 Shane Del Rosario and 15-3 LeVar Big Johnson. If I had to guess, this would be the bout that will produce the first replacement fighter should one of the 8 Grand Prix competitors need to withdraw. Johnson is in the midst of a 7-fight win streak, including 3 in a row under the Strikeforce banner, and Shane Del Rosario is undefeated with 2 wins while fighting for Strikeforce. For this fight, I would think that Del Rosario would be the favorite, paying out around $1.45, and Johnson the underdog at $2.55. The 2 combatants in this matchup are Muay Thai strikers, who have been making careers with ending fights in the first round. LeVar Johnson has scored a total of 13 first-round victories, 11 by KO or TKO, and 2 submissions, and comparably, Del Rosario has 9 victorious first-round finishes, 2 by submission and 7 by knockout. So there's a pretty good chance this fight won't go the distance. Even though these fighters are statistically comparable and both come from the same fighting base, they approach their matches differently. Johnson is a very powerful striker that really likes to work in tight. He tends to close the distance and uses strength to control an opponent against the cage and pound away. He's not overly versed on the mat, so he doesn't look for takedowns when he's in tight, but instead prefers to overwhelm an opponent against the cage wall. The terms swarm and smash came to mind when I was watching him in action. Now don't get me wrong, Johnson has no problem standing and trading leg kicks and punches with an opponent, but he isn't the quickest fighter, nor is he the most fluid striker when he exchanges. Johnson and Del Rosario have one-punch knockout power, but unlike LeVar, who likes to get in close, Del Rosario has more success when he keeps distance. He has heavy leg kicks, is pretty quick for a heavyweight, and has a devastating right hand. He likes to stand fairly straight up and down and keep both hands up and in tight where he can defend and threaten with either one. On the other side, Johnson likes to keep a little bit of a wider stance, holding his left hand out in front to gauge the distance as well as using it as a jab, while keeping the right hand coiled close to his head ready to explode. Similarly, both fighters like to use the Thai plum. Del Rosario will primarily target the head, while Johnson does a lot of damage when he uses his knees to target the body. Neither fighter builds their game plan around winding up on the mat, as both have had troubles with strong grapplers. But Del Rosario has successfully finished fights with submissions, usually after getting taken down and catching a surprised opponent from the bottom. Physically, Del Rosario and Johnson are roughly the same height, but Johnson will be heavier and have a 3-inch reach advantage. There has been some discussion of Del Rosario considering a drop to 205 to avoid some of the bigger fighters. This is a combination of his frame and his fighting style. He likes to utilize his speed, which isn't the most common approach in the heavyweight division. This showed up against Brandon Cash back in 2009 on a Strikeforce Challengers card. Cash closed the distance and used his size and strength to control Del Rosario and had him in trouble until he got submitted. Both fighters have knockout ability, and I give the overall striking edge to Del Rosario. But if LeVar can get in close, I think the size issue might show up again. Look for Johnson to close the distance on the faster Del Rosario, push him up against the cage, and use his knees and heavy hands to do some serious damage. So my prediction is the underdog, LeVar Johnson, to defeat and hand Shane Del Rosario his first loss by stoppage. It's time to look at the first heavyweight Grand Prix quarterfinal matchup. Andrei Arlovski is a former UFC heavyweight champ that has fallen on some harder times with 3 consecutive losses. All against quality opponents in Fedor, Brett Rogers, and Bigfoot Silva. Nonetheless, it's still 3 straight losses. Sergey Kharitonov is making his promotional debut and has won 4 of his last 5 fights, including a stoppage win over current Strikeforce heavyweight champ Alistair Overeem, just back in 2007. There are odds posted for this fight, and they are currently sitting at even at $1.85 each, which tells me that the odds makers expect a fairly good tilt in this one. Looking first at Arlovski, he has lost 3 straight fights, 2 first-round knockouts, and a 3-round decision against Antonio Silva, in which he was 1 punch behind his opponent for most of the fight. Despite his struggles, he is still a dangerous striker who holds 11 career knockouts. He has well above average speed for a heavyweight and very good boxing skills. His incredibly fast hands gave Fedor all he could handle when they met back in early 2009, but another aspect of Arlovski's stand-up proved more influential that night. The Belarusian's chin has become suspect, and his 22-second knockout defeat versus Brett Rogers only added to the belief that Andre possesses a glass chin. He did show in his last fight against Silva that not every punch that lands on his chin will end the fight. Now moving to Sergey Kharitonov, he has the type of power that can end Arlovski, or anyone else's night for that matter, with one punch. He holds 8 career knockout victories over names like Alistair Overeem, Pedro Hizo, and Sami Schultz, which says a lot about the Russian striking skills. Kharitonov hasn't partaken in a great deal of MMA action, competing only once a year since 2008 and mixing in 3 K1 kickboxing matches with a 1-2 record in that time span. Now, where the former UFC champion uses quickness and foot movement in his fights, Kharitonov does the opposite. He likes to keep his hands tight, tuck his chin, and stalks his opponents with little movement. In his last fight, his opponent used a lot of movement, circling the big Russian, and Sergey simply moved forward, waiting for the opening, and then landed one very effective straight right hand. He's a pretty patient striker with quick hands and good timing, all of which could spell disaster for Arlovski. Another approach Kharitonov likes to use is continually working over the body with punches, move in, attack, and retreat. He uses this to set up a headshot. When his opponent begins to adjust his defense to defend the body shots, that's when Sergey will attack the head, looking for the knockout. Both fighters use leg kicks. I'd give Andre the edge with his speed, but against Silva, he could have benefited from throwing far more kicks than he actually did. Excluding Arlovski's chin, I see some weaknesses in each fighter's game that the other might be able to capitalize on. Arlovski showed a tendency against Silva to complete his punches with his hands down, which left him vulnerable to be counterpunched, which Kharitonov is more than capable of producing. While Sergey stands a little too flat-footed for my liking, which can be exploited by an opponent that possesses the speed and footwork that Arlovski is capable of. Moving to the mat, both fighters have Sambo backgrounds, so their grappling skills are solid, but Kharitonov has the edge statistically with 8 career submission wins to Arlovski's 3. Overall, this is a big fight for Andre. He is on a pretty substantial losing streak that could become far worse should he not bring his A game in this fight. Looking at Sergey's track record, he hasn't faced a skilled striker in MMA since 2007, and in K1 he has suffered 2 knockouts in 3 fights over the last 2 years. Andre Arlovski has suffered 2 multiple fight losing streaks previous to this one in his career, and he's rebounded nicely following those. So I will be taking Andre Arlovski to defeat Kharitonov by decision and move on to face the winner of Josh Barnett and Brett Rogers in the semifinals. For our main event of the evening, we move across to the other side of the tournament bracket for another quarterfinal matchup as the last Emperor, Fedor Emelianenko, 32-2-1, will square off with Antonio Bigfoot Silva, 15-2. Fedor is entering this fight looking to rebound from only a second career defeat after being tapped out by Fabricio Verdum. Prior to that fight, he had ripped off 11 straight wins. Antonio Silva is looking for his 3rd consecutive victory after he too suffered only a second career defeat, also at the hands of Verdum. On the books, the odds heavily favor Fedor as he will pay out at $1.20 and Bigfoot will be a big dog at $4.05. In this bout, Silva will be the much bigger man by a wide margin. He will have a 7.5-inch reach advantage, stand 4 inches taller than Fedor, and will be at least 35 pounds heavier, potentially more at bell time. That being said, this isn't the first time that Fedor has faced these type of disparities. In fact, he's been faced with far greater physical disadvantages in the past against the likes of Hongman Choi. But I would have to say that Silva possesses the best all-around skill set by a fighter of his size that Fedor's met in the cage. I think this fight has a real possibility of a great deal of work being done in all 3 areas, on the mat, against the cage, and on the feet. Comparing the grappling skills, Bigfoot is a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, and even though he only has 3 wins via tap-out, he is quite dangerous on the mat and is always a threat, especially with his crushing strength. Fedor now is a well-decorated Sambo champion, having finished in the top 3 in 16 of his 17 Sambo tournaments, winning 12 of them. He holds 16 submission victories, while only having been submitted the 1 time. Of the 2, I would say Fedor's submission skills are more dangerous. He is far quicker on the mat and can attack a vulnerable appendage with lightning-fast speed for both the top and bottom. During an opponent's ground and pound, Fedor has shown an uncanny ability to time and grab hold of an arm and lock in an armbar for the win. He threatened this against Brett Rogers and had notable wins in this fashion against Mark Coleman and the monstrous Choi, who was smothering Fedor before getting tapped out. Silva should have a strength advantage, which he will utilize on the mat to both control an opponent and rain down powerful shots. And against an undersized Mike Kyle, he beat him up, continually worked for a better position, and when he got the mount, devastated Kyle with punches until the ref called for a stoppage. Fedor can do some damage on the ground as well, waiting for an opening and then using his speed to pummel away and overwhelm his foe, and he also has solid takedown defense and will punish an opponent when they shoot and are unable to finish. On the feet, Silva has serious power and deceptively quick hands as shown in the Arlovski fight. He does have a tendency to tire and slow down, which I think cost him a little bit in the Fabricio Verdum matchup. Now, Silva, he has a very solid chin with only one knockout defeat, which was back in 2006. And as a result, he is more willing to stand and trade, opting not to use a great deal of movement, and he stands flat-footed directly in front of his opponent. That being said, he did get rocked early on by Mike Kyle. Kyle used his quickness to land a nice 1-2 combination that sent Antonio to the mat and very nearly ended the fight. Fedor has heavy hands, most recently stopping Rogers and Arlovski when he connected, and when he hit Tim Sylvia's chin, that led to the big man hitting the mat. He's a patient striker, he moves in and out, but doesn't use a lot of lateral movement, and he keeps his hands up ready to attack. Now, Emelianenko isn't the most technical of strikers. He will swing wildly with big looping hooks, but when he connects and senses trouble for an opponent, he swarms as incredibly accurate with his strikes. He will also use striking to close the distance in order to set up his grappling, and against Tim Sylvia, he executed it well. He connected, got in tight with his strikes, got the bigger man on the mat, and submitted him. His timing is impeccable. Against Rogers, he landed a well-timed overhand right, and better yet, just check out the Arlovski fight for an example. Now, Fedor does have a few areas that concern him. He bleeds, last shown against Rogers, which can be an issue. Further, he can be overwhelmed by a bigger fighter. Choi had him pinned on the ground for most of that fight, and against Rogers, he took some serious punishment when Brett started to throw down blows. Now, because of this, his submission skills, he might not be concerned with being on the bottom, but Silva has very heavy ground and pound, so that might not be the best of ideas in this one. Now it's time to make a prediction. Looking at Silva, he really does present a number of problems for Fedor. He's bigger, stronger, has a good chin, solid striking, well-versed on the mat, and has never been knocked out. If Fedor is really on the downside of his career, this is the type of opponent to further that drop-off. But I look at two things. Verdum was able to survive Silva's attack early, and as Antonio tired, he began making mistakes in that fight. Secondly, if Mike Kyle was able to find Silva's chin, I would wager that Fedor will be able to find it as well. Silva could very well leave this fight victorious, and his payout is certainly worth the risk. But I think Fedor will enter this contest very motivated. He won't allow himself to make another mistake like he did in his last fight, and if he can survive Silva's attack early on, I think he will have success in this matchup. Look for a big shot to stun the Brazilian, allowing Fedor to take the fight to the mat for the finish, or Fedor catching Silva from the bottom with a submission, maybe an armbar. So my prediction is Fedor Emelianenko to defeat Antonio Silva and advance to the other semifinal by submission. So those are my 5 predictions for the Strikeforce and M-1 Global Fedor vs. Silva card. You can check out the sportsinteraction.com betting card at the top of the screen to see the odds and final payout. And please feel free to subscribe to my channel and comment on my video and rankings. My next predictions will be for UFC 127 later this month. So I'll see you back here then. And as always, thanks for watching Kamikaze Overdrive MMA Predictions.